Today's sermon is about the Jewish people declaring independence from Egypt. We celebrate our Independence Day with fireworks and military air shows, how we gained and maintain our freedom. But the Jewish people celebrate their independence with Passover, how they gained their freedom. Stephen, having successfully defended himself against the charges of blaspheming God, charges of blaspheming God, now moves to the second accusation, rejection of Moses. He shows that just as he reveres God, so also he honors Moses. Again, even though he doesn't say that he's pleading not guilty, instead, Stephen makes his case clear by continuing his historical survey. In the first 16 verses, he covered the period from Abraham to Joseph, from the call of Abraham to captivity of Israel in Egypt. Now we move into the second great period of Israel's history, from Moses to Mount Sinai. As the time drew near for God to fulfill His promise to Abraham, the number of our people in Egypt had greatly increased. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. He dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our ancestors by forcing them to throw out their newborn babies so that they would die. That promise that Stephen refers to here was the covenant that God made with Abraham to possess the land that He had shown him, and to his offspring after him. As we learned last time, the patriarchs of the Jews were already dead by this time. And Stephen tells us here that the people of Israel had increased and multiplied in Egypt. The book of Exodus tells us that they were so numerous they filled the land of Egypt. Probably more than 2 million people or more. The Jewish people were content in Egypt. They experienced great prosperity there for nearly 400 years and had no idea that they were going to return to the land that God had promised them. But the time of God's promise to be fulfilled had arrived, and God orchestrated to move Israel out of Egypt. And if you don't think that God will move you along if you say no to Him, you better watch out. At this time, there arose a new king over Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph. Alarmed at the growing Israelite population in Egypt and fearing that they might unite with an invader, this Pharaoh began to oppress the children of Israel. He took advantage of the Jewish race and forced them into slavery and hard labor. He mistreated them and even commanded that their newborn male child, not just the first, but all newborn male children, be thrown into the Nile River where they would die by drowning. Pharaoh's order to kill every newborn male should have been an alarm ringing in the minds of Stephen's listeners, the Sanhedrin, of the slaughter of innocents by Herod at the birth of Jesus Christ. Just a few short decades earlier than when he was giving this sermon. Stephen's review of Jewish history presents a clear testimony of God's faithfulness and sovereignty. Despite the continued failure of his chosen people to accept what God was doing, God was working out his plan. When we're forced by confusing circumstances, war, famine, epidemic, remember that God is still in control. Nothing surprises him. At that time, Moses was born, and he was no ordinary child. For 3 months, he was cared for by his family. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him up as her own son. Moses was educated in all of the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. You know, during the days when the Hebrew midwives were under order to kill Hebrew baby boys, Moses was born. God did not choose a convenient time for the child to be born. No, he chose the worst times for the nation's first real deliverer to be born. I'm sure you've all seen the movie Exodus, haven't you? Anybody here not seen the movie Exodus? One? Okay. Oh, well, you should see it. I've got it if you want to see it. It's great. We've all seen how Moses was put in the river Nile as ordered by Pharaoh. But he was put there in a basket that was waterproof. It didn't sink and drowned the baby. Pharaoh's daughter heard the child crying and rescued him and brought him up as her own child. Stephen tells us that Moses was brought up in all of the wisdom of the Egyptians. Moses was wise, powerful, and in Pharaoh's house, just as Joseph had been in the other Pharaoh's house. Moses' early life shows God prepares his people for future service. Even though Moses was taken from his family, upbringing provided him with the practical training, and upbringing provided him with the practical training and cultural insights he would need later in life when he came to time to lead to the promised land. God was preparing him. Because God is sovereign, nothing about our lives is ever accidental. Have you thought about that? Have you thought about that? Nothing about our lives is ever accidental. Nothing is ever wasted, no matter what it might be. Trust God to take all of your hard times, your educational opportunities, your life experiences, and to weave them together to equip you to be effective for His kingdom. And He'll do it. When Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. He saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. Moses' first attempt to lead his people came when he tried to save an Israelite who was being tortured, basically, by an Egyptian. Moses was a prince of Egypt. And he came to rescue his fellow Israelites and avenge him by killing the Egyptian. Apparently, Moses knew his calling and thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to save them. Unfortunately, they did not. Stephen related this incident in which Moses killed a cruel Egyptian taskmaster to remind the Jewish leaders that that there is a path before each person that seems right, but its end is death. Just months before Stephen was arrested, the religious leaders had convinced themselves and each other that Jesus was a dangerous threat. They thought he had to be eliminated. So they killed the very one sent to bring them salvation. In Moses' case, God wanted to use him to deliver the Jews, but not in the way Moses thought. The next day, Moses came upon two Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile them by saying, "Men, you are brothers. Men, you are brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other?" But the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" The two who were fighting questioned Moses' interceding in their argument. "Who made you ruler and judge?" Then they added ominously, "Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" "Listen, Israel," Stephen was saying. "Listen, Israel. Listen, Israel. Your Redeemer has come. But you have misunderstood his motive and his method." The parallels between the nation's rejecting of Jesus and its earlier rejection of Moses should have been another wake-up call, but it wasn't. When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. Pharaoh must have viewed Moses as the leader of the Jewish insurrection movement and sought to kill him. Realizing the killing of the Egyptian had become widely known, Moses fled and became an alien in the land of Midian and became the father of 2 sons. Israel's foolish rejection of Moses only served to lengthen their time in the bondage by 40 years. But God's still sovereign. After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames of a burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight. As he went over to get a closer look, he heard the Lord say, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses lived among the Midianites for those 40 years. At the end of that time, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness near the Mount of Sinai in the form of a burning bush that never burned up, by the way. When Moses saw it, he began to marvel at the sight, and as he approached to look at what was happening, there came a voice from the bush that said, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob." God made it clear to Moses he was the same God who made the covenant with his Jewish forefathers. Moses trembled with fear and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have indeed seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groaning and have come down to set them free. Now, come, I will send you back to Egypt. Moses shook with fear, and the Lord said to him, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Just like in the Holy of Holies in the temple, the area around the burning bush was made holy by the presence of God, the Holy One of Israel. God told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groans, and I've come down to deliver them. I'm sending you back to Egypt. Although his people were continually unfaithful to him, God remained faithful to his covenant. This is the same Moses they rejected with the words, who made you ruler and judge? He was sent to be their ruler and deliverer by God himself through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out of Egypt and performed signs in Egypt, Red Sea, and for 40 years in the wilderness. Stephen tells the Sanhedrin that the very same Moses whom the Jewish people disowned by saying, who made you ruler and judge, is the one whom God sent to be both ruler and deliverer, with God's help, of course. This is a constant pattern in Israel's history. Did you know that? Spiritual pride, coupled with spiritual ignorance, that causes them to reject the deliverers God sends to them. Over and over and over that happens throughout Jewish history. As Stephen points out, they rejected both Joseph, they sold him into slavery, and Moses, just as they now reject Jesus. This was their typical response to those sent to deliver them. Moses accomplished his mission and led them out, performing wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and even in the wilderness for 40 years. Israel's further rebellion against God under Moses, despite the wonders and signs they had seen, caused them another 40-year delay. That's next week's sermon, by the way. Because of that rebellion, they wandered outside of the promised land for 40 years. From Stephen's discussion of Moses, it is obvious that he has the utmost respect for him, for Moses. The charge of blaspheming Moses is as false as that of blaspheming God. Instead, Stephen turned the tables on the Sanhedrin, showing that the nation itself had been guilty of rejecting Moses. The Jews' response to Moses' life, like their response to Joseph's, parallels the response to Christ. This is the Moses who told the Israelites, God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your own people. Stephen reminded them that Moses predicted the Messiah would come, prophesying to the sons of Israel, God shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. That passage was well known to all of Stephen's contemporaries. They were thus doing again what their forefathers had done, rejecting the God-sent deliverer. Only this was more serious than all of the others combined. this was not just a prophet, but the Messiah they were rejecting. Had the Sanhedrin been willing to consider the facts, they wouldn't have missed the parallels between their nation's history and their behavior towards Jesus. Nor could they have missed the parallels between Jesus and Moses. Moses redeemed his people from the bondage in Egypt. Jesus redeems men from their bondage to sin. When the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. The history of Moses foreshadows the history of Jesus the Messiah. But the Jews would not listen and refused to see what God was doing right under their nose, right there in Jerusalem. Amen. Jesus said to the believers, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so, if the Son sets you free from sin and death, you will be free indeed. Amen.